you know, this holding reaches further than just Miss Mensing, and this is something I want to discuss. For instance, there's a lady named Debbie Shork up in Indiana. She felt its effects personally. Now, this is just a June decision, remember, and we've got all these things happening since then. Miss Shork went to the hospital and was ordered an IV of Phenergan for nausea. For nausea. She lost part of her right arm. Took nausea medication, lost part of her right arm. She believed that the drug was defective, sued the company in December of '09, and it was going through the court system until this ruling in Pleva versus Mensing, and it was discovered that it was a generic drug, and so it was thrown out. Gone for good, her rights forever gone. Now, she's missing part of her arm while that generic Phenergan continues to be sold in that hospital, and patients don't even know anything about this. Do you think that this is commonplace?
I do. I think it's very, very typical. How many patients are really monitoring these types of issues about their medications? These are legal issues, and most folks don't have a personal attorney on staff, and even the courts themselves, they have no option here. They may not agree with the Supreme Court ruling, and they may feel badly about what they're going to have to do, but under this ruling, they have no choice but to throw these patients' claims out of the court system.
Right. And there may well be another such case, and another, all around the country without any recourse in the courts under this ruling, no matter how many arms get amputated. Now, there are other cases like this. There's a case of Carrie Scott out in Mobile, Alabama. She lost her left arm because of the same drug. She lost her case. It was dismissed because of Pleva versus Mensing. Now, these are designed to highlight the fact that this can happen to anybody at any time. But the cases go on. Charlie Henderson lives outside of Atlanta, Georgia. Some more research I did. He took generic Dilantin. So remember now, we're talking about any drug at all. He takes the generic Dilantin drugs prescribed by his doctor for the treatment of seizures. He ends up with a severe syndrome called Stevens-Johnson. It's an extremely painful condition with rash and blisters all over the top layer of your skin that peels off and dies. He sued. It was dismissed. You know, these are the things that we're talking about that are very important for all Americans to pay attention to, because, as you stated, not everybody's an attorney. I mean, if you're listening today, these are things that you want to think about going forward, because if you don't know what you're up against, what do you do as Americans? If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Justice for All, the Wyatt Wright Show. We're talking about the disappearance of our American rights, and joining us in the studio today is San Antonio trial attorney Don Crook Jr., who handles cases just like this on behalf of injured victims all the time. Don, you know, it seems like we can go on and talk about drug after drug after drug. Is this something that we're going to get past, or is this something now that the Supreme Court has ruled that is going to continue to be applied to all drugs?
Well, I think for the moment it's going to continue to be applied to all drugs. It's one of the reasons I wanted to come on this show, because it's shows like this that help make a difference. Unless people start to do something, it's just going to be a one by one by one. No one realizes it's a problem until it happens to them. And that's just going to keep on happening until enough people speak up and get it changed.
Well, do you have any cases that maybe you've handled that are going to suffer the detriment of this ruling?
I do. I handle a lot of Reglan cases, and they haven't been dismissed yet, but they're right on the verge, and it's coming. And you know, as a lawyer, from a personal standpoint, it's hard to put years of work and hundreds of thousands of dollars into helping these people. But what's really tragic is when I have to make the phone calls and tell these folks that you don't have a case anymore, and they ask me why, and all I can tell them is, well, the court passed a law that says because it was a generic, you can no longer sue. And they just break down and they cry. It's tragic, and the tragic part is they just don't understand the why. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to them.
Right. And, you know, especially if you're taking a drug for something that, and I hesitate to use the word minor, but certainly is less dangerous than the effects of if you took it. I'm thinking of a guy out in Louisiana. He takes a generic of Trexall for psoriasis that he has. And psoriasis is a horrible thing. I know people in my family who've had it. It's something that's not fun at all. But he takes the generic, and because of alleged defects, he now is unable to dress himself, was in a coma, can't use the restroom, and cannot speak. I can't believe that if this information, which was known by the drug companies, was given to this guy, that even as horrible as psoriasis is, that he would have said, you know what, That's not worth it to me. And now drug companies under this ruling can't even speak about that to patients.
I agree. I think probably 75% or more of these conditions that patients are taking medicines for, if they knew the risks, they wouldn't risk it. Obviously, there are some where you would take that risk, but most of them, psoriasis. I have one Reglan case sticks out in my mind. It's just so tragic. A woman had an upset stomach, acid reflux, and so she started taking this drug. And now every time I go to her house to talk to her, she looks at me, her tongue hangs out, her face rotates, her mouth moves up and down, and she looks like she's having a permanent seizure 24 hours a day, all because she had acid reflux. And it's just one of the most tragic things I've ever seen. And if I could get these companies in front of a jury,
yeah,
I would win all day,
right,
every day.
Right.
But I can't even get them there.
Good. So where corporations screw up, the public has to shoulder the burden. And not just the public, but the individuals who get hurt. That's not right. That's not the way our system's supposed to work. Ladies and gentlemen, this concept of federal preemption comes from a reading of laws that empowered the FDA to approve drugs in the first place. Now, let me point out to everybody, this was done in 1938. So we've got laws from 1938 that say the FDA has the right to approve drugs. You cannot tell me that what Congress had in mind back in the 30s was this result. So we've got 80-something years that go by of the laws being enforced and people being able to have recourse in the courts, and now all of a sudden they can't have it. All of a sudden they can't have it. It doesn't sound right to me. You're listening to Justice for All, the Wyatt Wright Show. We're talking about the ever-increasing disappearance of your American rights, and in this case we're talking about Pleva versus Mensing, a case that prohibits or makes it now impossible for folks to sue generic drug manufacturers for failure to place certain warnings on their drug labels. All right. Now, at the here's something else that comes to mind, is that this ad, I want to get your thoughts on this, Don. This adds another layer of protection to name brand pharmaceutical companies. And here's what I mean. If a big name pharmaceutical company wants to charge exorbitant prices for its name brand drug, which they already do, and make billions of dollars, which they already do, they can do that. Now, under this ruling, once the patent expires, they can start an offshoot company and make the generic drug, charge less for the generic, but all the money is pure profit because they'll be completely insulated, tell me if I'm wrong, from any defective product lawsuits under this holding.
No, that's absolutely what will happen. And it's just going to go on and on. We've proven it time after time after time. A drug company will never voluntarily stop making a drug that harms the public. Not if it makes them money. It's never happened, and it never will.
Right. And I suppose that's the way that the whole capitalist system in some ways is designed to work. Do the best that you can, maximize your profits. But what we've always had to counteract that was the civil justice system to step in and say, wait a minute, that's a bridge too far. We've seen that in the Ford Pinto case. We've seen it in shoulder belts in cars. We've seen it in all these cases where public safety is made better every year because of the civil justice system. And that is something that appears to be disappearing. Now, let me get your thoughts here. At the very end of its holding, in this case, Supreme Court, Pleva versus Mensing, the Supreme Court said something that made it seem like they shouldn't be blamed for this ruling. They said, in essence, hey, this is our ruling, but look, Congress can change this if they want. Isn't this just a political game of pass the buck?
It certainly is. It seems designed to it's almost fraudulent. It lets the public, anybody who read that decision would think, well, something can be done about this. But anybody who follows this on a regular basis knows that Congress is not going to pass anything to overturn this decision unless there's just a tremendous outcry from the public.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's so difficult to get nowadays, especially when you end up with things like these supermajorities like we see in the Texas legislature, where the people who are vested with making one decision or another are all aligned with one particular political party or the other, and that's something that no American ought to be real thrilled about. But the Supreme Court gets to make the final decision, and in Pleva versus Mensing, the vote was 5-4. 5-4. So this is a very narrow majority, and yet it's the law of the land. I'd like to think that decisions of this magnitude are not done for political reasons, but, ladies and gentlemen, the breakdown in this case of the 5-4 vote was exactly along the lines of the political party that appointed that justice. So you've got for the decision were Thomas, Roberts, Scalia, Alito, and Kennedy. Those are George Bush and Reagan appointees. And for the decision were, against the decision were Sotomayor, Ginsburg, Breyer, and Kagan, which are Clinton or Obama appointees. And so you've got, in this case, the Republican appointed justices favoring the corporations and the democratically appointed justices favoring average Americans. And Justice Sotomayor claims that this majority's opinion, quote, makes little sense. What do you think about that?
Well, I would certainly agree. I mean, our country is based upon the concept of and justice for all, which obviously means everyone. And this decision gives justice to someone who took a name brand drug and no justice to someone who took the generic of that drug. That makes no sense.
Yeah, it makes no sense. And so what you end up with are these decisions that, and this is something else that just, it makes me wonder. This is not like a new law that had to be interpreted. These are 1930s laws that now, with the change in the makeup of the Supreme Court, all of a sudden we're seeing these rulings. We've seen it in Citizens United. We've seen it here. You know, as a previous case we discussed on this show. And so I can't help but worry that there's more to come along the same vein. And if we don't have the people who call their U.S. representative, who call their congressman, who speak up that we're going to face more of this, I think you said it right. It's justice for all. What do we do to get people motivated or excited about this type of stuff?
Well, we definitely need all your callers to write their U.S. representatives and senators in a call for action, because these medicines are affecting people one at a time. Nobody cares about one person hurt and then another person. There has to be groups of people coming together to get something done. And so we need letters and phone calls. It's going to take group action to get something done.
Great. I know, and that's something I hope everybody does. We're going to have to wrap this show up, but as you go through your week, remember that it was Justice Learned Hand who so famously said, if we are to keep our democracy, there must be one commandment, thou shalt not ration justice. Have a great day, everybody. We're going to talk again next week right here on Justice for All, the Wyatt Wright Show. Do it now.